Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight I'm continuing my review of the Twilight Zone TV series, the original. As always, you can find all episodes of the show, along with links to social media, other ways to listen, and ways to support the show, along with links to the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, over on the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. And support is never expected, but always appreciated, and especially with all the expenses that there are in doing these shows. So, and just in life in general, basically. So, let's get to the reviews here. We are in the middle of Season 2. We're actually on Season 2, Episode 16. And so for anyone that is wondering how I do these shows, I listen to them, and then I find they're basically all summarized now on Wikipedia. And what I do is I skim through the Wikipedia page and use that to sort of refresh my memory about what I listen to, and give you all a summary of the plot for these shows. And then I talk about how there are parallels or connections between the stories on these shows and experiences people have had and things that have happened throughout time that are unusual, that are anomalous. So it's been a lot of fun, and we still have so much more to go. But so I think that with that we can get going on this next one here. This episode is called "A Penny for Your Thoughts," and so this starts with a man. He was a bank clerk. His name is Hector Poole. It's Poole. He's on the way to work one day when he tosses a coin into a vendor's open box to pay for a newspaper, and it somehow lands on the edge. And all of a sudden, he can hear, after this happens, he can hear other people's thoughts. He suddenly has this ability. Again, no idea how these two things are connected exactly. But he has this ability to hear. He's basically telepathic at this point. But of course does not know what that means or what's going on. And so he's distracted. And as he's walking, he's nearly hit by a car. And he's confused when he hears the driver expressing concern when the driver is talking after they stop and make sure he's okay. But also, this driver is angry and at Hector being careless. So Hector is seeing the man speak and ask if he's okay, and seeming to be very concerned. Meanwhile, the man's thoughts are coming through as very angry. So he continues on to work after the driver goes away, and he's finalizing the paperwork for a loan, a major loan to a businessman named Sykes. That's a $200,000 loan. Now, of course, this is back in the 60s, so this is pretty big money at the time. And he hears Sykes thinking about using the money for gambling at the local horse track to win back money that he's already embezzled from his company. And again, this is Hector hearing Sykes' thoughts. And at this point, Hector still hasn't quite gotten or understood or figured out that he's telepathic. He thinks that he's just not seeing things right, and these people he's encountering, they're actually saying things somehow without him noticing. So he confronts Sykes, who accuses him of lying, and takes his business elsewhere. And of course, this does not make the boss, Bagby, happy. So, at this point, Hector is having not so great of a day. His boss is mad at him now. So Hector is, as he's still trying to get through his workday, he hears another employee, an older man, Smithers is the last name, thinking about how he will steal cash from the bank and escape to Bermuda. And he also hears he takes he finds another employee, Helen Turner, that's her name. He pulls her aside and tells her that what he just thinks he heard out loud, which was not out loud; it was in Smithers' mind. So, and of course, Helen is as he's telling her all this, she is thinking about him, about Booth, about Hector. There we go. And she's thinking about how she likes him, basically. And so, let me see. I lost my spot here. And so she, at this point, that's when Hector starts to figure out that maybe he has this weird ability to hear thoughts. And he explains it to her, and of course she doesn't believe this, but she does urge him to tell the boss, Bagby, about what he picked up supposedly from Smithers. So Hector goes to Bagby, who is already not happy with him, and he tells Bagby what he overheard Smithers saying. And of course, Bagby does not believe this because Smithers has been working for the bank for a long time and has been a great worker. And it turns out Smithers is innocent. And Bagby fires Hector because of this is the second thing now in the one day that has not done well for the company, thanks to Hector. So after that, as Hector is getting ready to leave the office, Smithers talks to Hector and wants to know what was going on, and how he asks how Hector knew that Smithers had fantasized for years about stealing from the bank and leaving the bank. And of course, that's all it turns out it ever was. It was this fantasy, this almost like a daydream that Hector was able to pick up on. And that right there, that just shows you how being able to read thoughts, or sense thoughts, or basing things on something that someone is thinking. This is more of a conspiracy angle to things, but this idea of anyone in power knowing what everyone else is thinking, it could go terribly wrong. And this is just, of course, a TV show and an example of a minor way that could happen. But anyway, so looks like so that after that, Smithers walks away, and Hector talks to Helen about all this, and he also has learned more than he wanted to about Bagby. And he's explaining to Helen that it's not fun to be able to read thoughts because Bagby also is giving off thoughts. But at some point after that, Bagby learns that Sykes has been arrested for gambling with company money. And did I skip ahead? I think I skipped ahead. Let me check on this. So no, I didn't. But so yeah, so at this point, Hector is offered a job back at the bank, and Hector uses information that he got basically through, again, this new ability he has, to not only get a job back, but to get a raise, because of basically these thoughts that he heard from Bagby while Bagby was on the phone with a girlfriend, not wife. So Hector learns of all this, and he uses this knowledge to blackmail his boss, to get get his job back and get a raise, and then get a Bermuda vacation for Smithers. So Hector leaves work, and he's on his way back home, and Helen goes for part of the journey with him, and they stop at the newsstand where his coin is still standing. Now this is after a whole work day, and so Hector buys afternoon paper, an afternoon paper. Well, I guess paper that was released in the afternoon, and as he does this, of course, he puts another coin in the box for the paper for paying for the paper, and the original coin is knocked over. And once this happens, he finds that he can't read thoughts anymore, and he leaves the newsstand with Helen. And of course, the idea is that they are getting closer. So, and the sort of a happy ending after all the chaos that happened in the show. It was done well, of course, with just people having the recordings of people's voices playing in the show, even though you can clearly see that they were not speaking out loud. And I like that they showed Hector didn't realize right away what was happening. And I would imagine that would be the case if that happened to someone in real life. The really odd thing here, this is going to sound just out there because it is, but I had a couple of experiences where I was here at home late at night, and I started hearing voices I recognized of people that were in the general area, not right by me, but just neighborhood, I guess you could say. And it was just general, mundane, ordinary things, like I have to go to the store or things like that. And it only lasted for a couple of seconds. But I wonder if I was somehow, at this time, I don't know how or why, able to pick up on thoughts. And it was not, luckily it was not anything major, because, again, you hear about that in fiction, this idea of telepathy and having different abilities with your mind. But what also, when you get into maybe more established fiction with characters that are around for years and decades, it's a lot to deal with. And in fact, characters have to work. I'm thinking really a lot right now of, like, of course, because it's what I know, things like Marvel Comics, like different characters in the comic books that I've read over the years. They don't keep themselves open to everything all the time. And I would think that would be very realistic, because otherwise you would, first of all, be overwhelmed with all the sound in not sound, but just this something similar to sound going on in your mind. All this, I guess, would be energy that you're picking up on, bouncing around in your mind. And I would imagine it would not be fun. But then, of course, there's the added aspect of finding out things you really have no business knowing, and you don't want to know. So the show was really well done, and I definitely recommend it. I think everything was good. So I'm going to move on to the next episode here, so we can get at least one more done with this show here before we stop for the night. But yeah, so that was a good episode. Moving on to the next one here. once I find the link. So this next episode is episode 17 of season 2 of the Twilight Zone, and it's the title is actually 22. So this is talks about or features a woman in the show. She's a professional dancer, and she's in the hospital. Her name is Liz Powell. She's in the hospital as a result of overwork and a nervous fatigue. So, and part of this is she has this nightmare, keeps having this nightmare that happens over and over again. And so she wakes up in her hospital room, and this is sort of at the start of the show, because she's hearing the loud ticking of a clock. And she, so when she's moving, getting up, or waking up and getting out of bed, or trying to sit up in bed anyway, she knocks a glass of water to the floor, and of course it shatters, and follows the sound of footsteps that she hears into the hall. And she sees a woman, a nurse, who's sort of half hidden in the shadows of other lights in the hallway. And this nurse goes to the basement in the elevator. And so she follows the nurse down and finds the hospital morgue. And she finds room number 22. And the nurse shows up from the room and says that there's room for one more. Excuse me. And Liz screams and leaves the elevator, or leaves to the elevator. And it turns out that is the nightmare that she's been having. So she actually thinks she wakes up in a nightmare, but she doesn't actually wake up. So when she comes out of it, she tries to tell everyone in the staff in this hospital that these nightmares, they're real, even though they feel like nightmares. And of course, no one believes her. Whether it's the doctor or her manager, Barney. So the doctor tries to tell her that this is impossible. And to do this, he shows her the night nurse who attends the morgue. And Liz doesn't recognize her. So the doctor suggests that Liz try an experiment and basically try to lucid dream, to actually have her agency of her own in the dream, to change just one detail of the dream, sort of to help her prove to herself that it's not real. So the show cuts to nighttime again, and she has the dream, and she visualizes in her mind a pack of cigarettes on the table, on the nightstand, next to the glass of water. And so when the clock wakes her up, she reaches for a cigarette instead of the glass of water, and she drops the lighter. And while reaching to retrieve it, of course, her other hand knocks the glass of water to the floor. And the dream continues as it had before. So, ending in the morgue. And, of course, Liz wakes up after that, and a nurse has to hold her down while the doctor gives her a sedative. And the doctor tells the nurse that it's odd that Liz, who has never actually been down to the real morgue in the hospital, knows that it's room 22. So, several days later in the show, it skips forward in time, Liz is able to be discharged from the hospital. And so she goes to the airport to fly to her next job in Miami Beach. And she buys her ticket and is told she'll be on flight 22. And she starts feeling strange, almost like she's in a dream again. And she's thirsty and distracted by the ticking of a clock that only she hears. And she bumps into a woman carrying a vase, which drops and shatters. And of course, she hears loud footsteps. So she keeps on going toward the plane and climbs the stairs of the plane. And when she gets to the top, a stewardess is there, and she's identical to the nurse from the dream, the original dream at the start of the show. And she comes from the cabin, and she says, "There's room for one more." And of course, this drives Liz away from the plane, and she goes back to the terminal. And she leaves the area, and the plane takes off, and then the show ends with it exploding. So this one is a wild one because it combines so many things. You have this sort of premonition dream. It is sort of using a setting that she's already in, which is this hospital. And what it seems like to me, now that I'm thinking about it as I've been describing this, it's almost like it's a predictive dream or premonition, but it doesn't use the airport because she hasn't been there yet. But it involves a lot of the same sounds and similar actions and similar things happening. And to the point where when she's experiencing some of these things in the waking world, she starts to get this feeling of being in a dream, even though she's not, because they are so similar. And then the question is, did she somehow get a feeling or get a sense, or was it a warning from herself or from who knows who else that she should not go on that plane? Because, again, in the end of the show, it exploded. I've heard of people having weird dreams about planes and or even just weird feelings, excuse me, about planes, about upcoming trips that they're going to take on planes, and having this feeling or having this dream that convinces them that they shouldn't go. And then, unfortunately, something happens with the actual plane. There's a great tragedy that happens that they would have been part of if they would have gone on the plane that they had been supposed to go on. So, and the dream aspect is also, I mean, that's something we talk about in this show and over on Troubled Minds as well. When I call in there and they talk about as well how dreams and sleep and this altered state of the brain when it's sleeping seems to be a gateway to all kinds of other paranormal experiences. But that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.